The rain had stopped 3 days ago, but Elena's clothes still hadn't dried completely. She pressed her palm against the rough bark of an oak tree, steadying herself as another wave of exhaustion rolled through her body. 7 months pregnant, running on scraps and terror, with the ghost of her dead mate haunting every shadow. This was what her life had become. She allowed herself 30 seconds to rest, 30 seconds to close her eyes and remember Marcus's face, the way he'd smiled when she'd told him about the baby. That smile had lasted exactly 4 hours before the Thornwood pack had come. Keep moving. The baby needs you to keep moving. Her wolf, usually so present in her thoughts, had gone quiet since Marcus's death. Not entirely gone. Elena could still feel her there, curled in the darkest corner of her mind like a wounded animal. But the voice that had guided her through every major decision of her life had fallen silent, leaving her alone with nothing but human instinct and maternal desperation. The border town of Millhaven emerged from the morning mist like a promise she didn't dare believe. Wooden buildings clustered around a central market square, smoke rising from chimneys, the distant sound of merchants calling their wares. Normal life. Safe life. The kind of life Elena had taken for granted until 3 weeks ago. She counted the coins in her pocket one more time. 12 coppers, enough for bread, dried meat, and maybe, if she bargained well, a night's shelter before she crossed into the unclaimed lands beyond. The plan was simple. Disappear, where no one would think to look for a pregnant Omega with no pack. An Omega who should be dead, whispered the part of her that still heard Marcus's final scream. Elena pushed away from the tree and forced her swollen feet forward. The baby shifted inside her, a gentle flutter that had become her only comfort. For this child, she would walk through fire. For this child, she had already walked through hell. The market square was crowded with the morning rush. Farmers selling vegetables, smiths hawking tools, women examining bolts of cloth with critical eyes. Elena kept her head down, her threadbare cloak pulled tight around her shoulders. She looked like what she was, a refugee, a stray. The kind of wolf that packs tolerated at the edges but never truly accepted. She moved through the stalls mechanically, selecting the cheapest items that would provide the most nutrition. Hard cheese that would last for days, dense bread that wouldn't spoil, strips of dried venison that made her stomach growl despite her anxiety. The basket grew heavier with each addition, the weight pressing against her wrists. Her arms had been shaking since yesterday. She'd noticed it while trying to fill her water skin at a stream, the fine tremor that spoke of muscles pushed beyond their limits. Marcus would have carried everything for her. Marcus would have made her rest while he scouted ahead. Marcus would have... Marcus is dead. You are not. Move. She picked up a small jar of honey, calculating whether the extra copper was worth the boost of energy it would provide. Her arms trembled harder. The basket shifted. And then, it was falling, her grip failing at the worst possible moment, supplies scattering toward the muddy ground. A hand caught the basket's handle before it hit the earth. Strong fingers, calloused and sure, steadying what she couldn't hold. Easy, said a voice like smoke and stone. I've got it. Elena's gaze traveled up a worn soldier's coat, past broad shoulders that blocked out the morning sun, to a face that made her breath catch in her throat. Gray eyes, sharp and assessing. Dark hair touched with early frost at the temples. A jaw that could have been carved from granite, shadowed with several days' worth of stubble. He was tall, taller than Marcus had been, and he held her basket like it weighed nothing at all. Thank you, she managed, reaching for the handle. I can... Their fingers touched. Heat erupted through Elena's chest so violently that she gasped, staggering back a step. It felt like someone had reached into her ribcage and wrapped their fist around her heart, squeezing with an intensity that blurred the line between pleasure and pain. Her skin prickled with sudden awareness, every nerve ending lighting up like stars in a midnight sky. No. No. No, no. The man's gray eyes flashed gold. Not a gradual shift, not a subtle change, but a complete transformation that lasted only a heartbeat before he blinked it away. His nostrils flared as he inhaled sharply, and a low growl rumbled from his chest. The kind of sound she hadn't heard since Marcus, the kind of sound that meant recognition, that meant claim, that meant. Her wolf surged forward from that dark corner where she'd been hiding, slamming against Elena's consciousness with a force that nearly drove her to her knees. 3 weeks of silence shattered in an instant, replaced by a howl of pure, undeniable certainty. Mate. 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 No, Elena whispered, backing away. Her heel caught on a cobblestone, and only the stranger's quick hand on her elbow kept her from falling. His touch sent another cascade of warmth through her veins, and she yanked her arm free like she'd been burned. That's not. I can't. Impossible, her mind insisted. You already had a mate. You buried your mate. The bond broke when Marcus died. And it doesn't come back. It doesn't just. But her wolf was howling, and her heart was racing, and the stranger was staring at her with an expression that mirrored her own shock, as if someone had just rearranged the foundations of his entire world. You're afraid, he said, and there was something like wonder in his voice, something like reverence. Don't be. I won't. He stopped himself, jaw tightening. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. I won't do anything you don't want. Elena's hand moved instinctively to her swollen belly. The stranger's gaze followed the movement, and she watched his expression shift, shock deepening into something more complex, something she couldn't read. You're pregnant, he said. Yes. The word came out sharp, defensive. My mate. My dead mate's child. She expected him to withdraw, expected the cold look that other wolves gave her when they realized she was already claimed, already ruined, carrying another man's legacy in her womb. She had prepared herself for rejection so thoroughly that she'd already begun to turn away. His hand closed gently around hers, stopping her. Let me carry this for you, he said, lifting the basket. His voice had gone soft, impossibly soft for a man built like a weapon. At least to wherever you're staying, you're exhausted. I don't need. Please. One word. A request, not a command. Coming from a stranger with eyes that had just flashed gold for her, from a wolf whose entire body was vibrating with restrained intensity, from a man who should have been demanding submission and was instead asking permission. Elena's wolf whined, pressing against her ribs. Let him. Just this once. Let someone help. I have a room, she heard herself say, at the inn on the corner, just for tonight. He nodded, and when he fell into step beside her, he matched his stride to hers, shorter, slower, accommodating her pregnancy-slowed pace without comment or complaint. The market crowd parted around him like water around a stone, and Elena noticed something strange. People weren't just moving aside, they were bowing. Subtle dips of their heads, quick glances away, the kind of deference that ordinary soldiers didn't receive. Who is he? But she was too tired to ask, too overwhelmed by the bond that pulsed between them like a second heartbeat. Her wolf had gone quiet again, but not like before. Not withdrawn and wounded. This silence was different. This silence was the focused stillness of a predator who had found exactly what she was hunting for. They reached the inn without speaking. Elena's room was small, barely more than a bed and a washstand, but it was dry and it was safe, and it was hers for the next 12 hours. The stranger set her basket on the small table by the window, and she watched him survey the space with a single comprehensive glance. His gaze lingered on the empty shelf where food should have been stored, on the single thin blanket folded at the foot of the bed, on her swollen feet, visible beneath the hem of her dress, mottled with the purple evidence of too many miles walked on too little rest. When did you last eat? He asked. This morning. His jaw tightened. When did you last eat properly? Elena opened her mouth to lie, but something in his gray eyes stopped her. He would know. Somehow, impossibly, he would know. 3 days ago, she admitted. There was a farm wife who took pity on me, gave me bread and broth. The stranger was moving toward the door before she finished speaking. Wait. Where are you? Stay here, he said, and there was command in his voice now, but not the cruel kind. The kind that expected to be obeyed because obedience was safer. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. I don't even know your name. He paused at the threshold, and when he looked back at her, something ancient and fierce moved behind his eyes. Eric, he said. My name is Eric. Then he was gone, and Elena was alone with the thundering of her heart and the impossible heat still burning in her chest. Elena stood in the center of the small room, her hand pressed against her chest where the heat still pulsed like a living thing. The door had closed behind Eric. Eric. She had a name now. A name to attach to the impossible. And she should have been moving. Should have been locking the door as he'd instructed. Should have been unpacking her meager supplies and planning her next move. Instead, she stood frozen, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Her wolf was pacing now, restless and alert in a way she hadn't been since before Marcus died. Elena could feel her pressing against the edges of her consciousness, not demanding control but simply present in a way that felt both familiar and terrifying. He's not our mate, Elena insisted silently. We had a mate. Marcus was our mate. The bond broke when he died. But even as she thought it, she knew it wasn't quite true. The bond with Marcus had been warm and steady, a comfortable presence that had grown slowly over the 2 years of their mating. This, whatever this was with Eric, felt different, sharper, more intense, like the difference between a candle flame and a forest fire. Impossible, she thought again, but the word felt hollow now. She forced herself to move, crossing to the door and sliding the bolt into place. Her hands were shaking again, though whether from exhaustion or shock, she couldn't tell. Maybe both. Probably both. The baby kicked, a solid thump against her ribs that made her gasp and press her palm to her belly. I know, she murmured. I don't understand it either. She lowered herself onto the edge of the bed, her swollen feet throbbing with relief as she took the weight off them. The room was cold. No fire in the small hearth, and the single thin blanket wouldn't provide much warmth, but it was shelter. It was safety. It was more than she'd had for 3 weeks of running, and Eric had said he would come back. Why do I believe him? She didn't know him. Didn't know anything about him except his name and the fact that his eyes had flashed gold when their skin touched. Except that the market crowd had bowed to him. Except that her wolf, silent for 3 weeks, had woken at the first brush of his fingers and screamed mate with absolute certainty. Elena closed her eyes and let herself remember Marcus, the gentle curve of his smile, the way he'd held her after nightmares, whispering that she was safe, that he would always protect her. The look on his face when she'd told him about the baby, wonder and terror and joy all tangled together. 4 hours, she thought. That's all we had. 4 hours of knowing we would be a family, and then... The memory of his scream cut through her thoughts like a blade, and she shoved it away before it could consume her. She couldn't afford to fall apart. Not now. Not when she was so close to escaping, so close to finding safety in the unclaimed lands where no pack held territory. But Eric's face kept surfacing in her mind, gray eyes going gold, that low, rumbling growl that had vibrated through her bones. The way he'd caught her basket before it could fall, as if protecting her was instinct rather than choice. Let me carry this for you. Please. Marcus had never said please, not because he was unkind. He wasn't. He had been gentle and good and she had loved him, but because he'd been raised to lead, to command, to expect obedience. He'd softened with her over time, learned to ask instead of order, but it had never come naturally to him. Eric had said please like he meant it, like her choice mattered more than his desire. A knock at the door made her jolt upright, her heart slamming against her ribs. "It's Eric." 2 words, spoken low enough that only wolf-sharp ears would catch them through the wood. Elena's breath stuttered in her chest. She should stay where she was. Should pretend she hadn't heard. Let him think she was asleep. Wait for him to give up and leave. But her wolf was already pressing her to move, and her feet were already carrying her across the room, and her hands were already reaching for the bolt. She opened the door. Eric stood in the dim hallway, a covered pot in one hand and a bundle tucked under his arm. Steam curled from beneath the pot's lid, and the smell that reached her, rich broth, herbs, real food, made her stomach clench with sudden, desperate hunger. "May I come in?" he asked. She stepped aside without speaking. He moved past her into the room, and she was struck again by how large he was. Not just tall, but broad, built like something meant for war. Yet he navigated the small space with surprising grace, setting the pot on the table and unwrapping the bundle to reveal a crusty loaf of bread, a wedge of cheese, and a small glass jar filled with something golden. "Honey," he said, noting her gaze, "for your throat. You sound hoarse." Elena's hand moved instinctively to her neck. She hadn't realized she sounded hoarse. Hadn't realized he'd been listening closely enough to notice. "This is too much," she said. "I can't pay. I'm not asking for payment." "Then what are you asking for?" The question came out sharper than she'd intended, edged with 3 weeks of fear and loss and desperate survival. Eric went still, his hands pausing over the bread he'd been slicing. "Nothing," he said quietly. "I'm asking for nothing. People don't give things without wanting something in return. Some do." He set a thick slice of bread on a chipped plate she hadn't noticed him pulling from the bundle. "Eat, please, before it gets cold." Her wolf whined, pressing against her ribs. "He's not lying. Can't you feel it? He wants nothing but to feed us, to care for us." Elena sat down at the table because her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. The first spoonful of stew hit her tongue, and she nearly sobbed. Rich, savory, thick with chunks of meat and vegetables. It was the best thing she'd tasted in weeks. Maybe longer. She ate without speaking, too hungry to manage words, and Eric made no attempt to fill the silence. He moved around the room instead, feeding kindling into the cold hearth, coaxing flames to life, hanging her damp cloak near the growing warmth. When he found the thin blanket, he frowned and left the room again without explanation. He returned before she'd finished eating, carrying a thick quilt that smelled of cedar and wool. "Where did you—" "The innkeeper owed me a favor." Elena watched him spread the quilt over the bed, smoothing it with careful hands. Her throat tightened with something she couldn't name. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Eric turned to face her. In the firelight, his features looked softer somehow, still carved from granite, but with shadows that spoke of exhaustion, of burdens carried alone. His gray eyes held hers, and she felt that heat pulse between them again, undeniable and terrifying. "Because you needed someone to," he said simply. It wasn't an answer. Or maybe it was the only answer that mattered. He crossed to the door, and panic spiked through her chest. Absurd, unreasonable, unwanted. "Where are you going?" "Nowhere." He lowered himself to sit against the wall beside the door, stretching his long legs out before him. "Sleep. I'll be here." "You can't. The floor is—" "I've slept in worse places." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Far worse. This is practically luxury." Elena opened her mouth to argue, but exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. The warmth from the fire was seeping into her bones. Her belly was full for the first time in days. And Eric was sitting sentinel by her door, promising safety with his presence, if not his words. "I don't understand you," she said. "You will." His gray eyes gleamed in the firelight. "Sleep, Elena." The sound of her name in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. He shouldn't know her name. She hadn't given it. But she was too tired to ask how, too tired to do anything but drag herself to the bed and collapse onto the cedar-scented quilt. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was that she should be afraid, should be terrified of this stranger who knew her name, whose eyes flashed gold for her, whose touch had woken her wolf from 3 weeks of grieving silence. But her wolf was curled warm and content in her chest, and the bond hummed softly between them like a promise, and for the first time since Marcus died, Elena felt something other than fear. She didn't have a name for what she felt. Not yet. But it felt like the first breath after drowning. Elena woke to pale morning light filtering through the window and the sound of voices in the hallway. She lay still, her wolf immediately alert, her ears straining to catch the words. "Room was paid through last night, and last night is over." The innkeeper's voice, sharp with barely concealed disdain. "I won't have an unmated pregnant stray driving away my respectable customers." "She's not—" A second voice, one Elena didn't recognize. A serving girl, perhaps. "I don't care what she claims to be. No pack markings, no mate scent, belly swollen with some vagrant's pup. The kind of woman who brings trouble. I want her out before noon." Elena's stomach twisted. She'd heard these words before, at every inn and boarding house since she'd started running. Unmated. Stray. Trouble. As if being widowed and pregnant made her somehow less than other wolves. As if losing everything she loved had been a choice. She was struggling to sit up when the door opened. Eric stepped inside, and something in his face made her freeze. The softness from last night was gone, replaced by something cold and ancient and utterly terrifying. His gray eyes had gone flat as river stones, and when he spoke, his voice held an edge that could cut steel. "Wait here," he said. It wasn't a request. He was back in the hallway before she could respond, pulling the door closed behind him. Elena pushed herself out of bed and pressed her ear to the wood, her heart hammering. "Believe there's been a misunderstanding." Eric's voice, but different. Lower. Carrying a weight of authority that made the fine hairs on her arms stand up. "No misunderstanding." The innkeeper, still sneering. "I know her kind. Probably got herself pregnant by some married alpha and had to run before his real mate." Enough. One word. Just one. But it landed like a physical blow, and Elena heard the innkeeper stumble back. Heard his breath catch in what sounded terrifyingly like a sob. "Do you know who I am?" Eric asked. A pause, then a strangled sound. No, I didn't. Look at me." Silence. Then the innkeeper's voice, completely transformed. "Your Majesty, forgive me. I didn't recognize— Please, I meant no disrespect." "Not to me. To her." What?" "The woman in that room is under my protection." Eric's voice had gone quieter, which somehow made it more frightening. "She is not a stray. She is not trouble. She is mine to safeguard, and you will treat her accordingly." Elena's hand flew to her mouth. "Your Majesty. Majesty. He's—" "Her room is paid through the end of the month," Eric continued. "She will receive 3 hot meals daily. Fresh linens. Whatever she requires, you will provide. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Majesty, of course. I'm deeply sorry." "Your apology belongs to her, not me. You'll deliver it personally. Later, when she's ready to receive it?" "Yes, Your Majesty." Footsteps retreating rapidly down the hall. Elena backed away from the door, her mind spinning, her wolf pressing hard against her ribs with something that felt like triumph. The door opened. Eric stepped inside, and his eyes found hers immediately, searching, assessing, checking for damage. "You heard?" he said. Not a question. "Your Majesty." The words came out broken. The innkeeper called you?" "Eric." His voice gentled, all that terrifying authority draining away. "To you, I'm just Eric." "You're the king." "Yes." "The Alpha King." "Yes." Elena's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the edge of the bed, her hands pressed to her belly as if she could shield her child from the enormity of what she'd just learned. The Alpha King. Ruler of all the packs, the most powerful wolf in existence, and his eyes had flashed gold for her. His wolf had recognized her. The bond that hummed between them wasn't just a mate bond, it was a royal mate bond. "I should go," she whispered. I need to leave. I'm putting you in danger. They'll think." "Elena." He crossed to her, dropping to his knees so their eyes were level. This close, she could see the strain around his mouth, the shadows under his eyes. "There is no danger you could bring that I cannot face. There is no threat they could make that would make me send you away. You don't know that. You don't know what's hunting me." The Thornwood Pack. Her sharp intake of breath made his jaw tighten. "Yes, I know. I made inquiries last night. I know they slaughtered your mate. I know you've been running for 3 weeks. I know you're carrying his child, and I know—" His voice broke, just slightly. "I know that none of that changes what I feel when I look at you." Her wolf was howling. Her heart was shattering. Her whole body trembled with the effort of not reaching for him. "I was mated before," she said. "I loved him. I'm carrying his child." "I know. It doesn't bother you?" Eric's hand lifted, hovering near her face without quite touching her. "Your loyalty to your lost mate tells me who you are. Your determination to protect your child tells me you're strong enough to stand beside a king." His gray eyes softened. "And the bond tells me the rest. The bond is impossible. And yet, here we are." Elena closed her eyes. Her wolf pressed forward, and for once, she didn't push back. She let herself feel it, the warmth spreading through her chest, the steady pull toward this man she barely knew, the bone-deep certainty that had been growing since their fingers first touched. "I'm not ready," she said. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready." "I know." Eric lowered his hand without touching her. "I won't rush you. I won't demand anything. But I'm asking you. Let me protect you. Let me help you. Whatever happens between us, whatever you decide, let me at least give you safety." She should say no. Should run while she still could, before the bond sank any deeper into her bones. Should disappear into the unclaimed lands like she'd planned. But her wolf was quiet for the first time in 3 weeks, and her daughter was kicking gently beneath her heart, and Eric was looking at her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Eric's smile was like sunrise after a long, dark night. "Thank you," he said. And she could feel through the bond that he meant it, that her trust, given so reluctantly, was the greatest gift he'd ever received. It terrified her. It also felt like coming home. The morning light shifted through the window as Elena sat on the edge of the bed, her heart still racing from the words she'd just spoken. Eric remained on his knees before her, his gray eyes searching her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You need to eat," he said quietly, rising to his feet with the fluid grace of a predator. "I brought breakfast before the innkeeper's revelation." She hadn't noticed the tray he'd left by the door. Warm bread, soft cheese, sliced apples, and a cup of something that steamed gently in the cool morning air. Her stomach clenched with hunger she'd been ignoring for weeks. "You keep feeding me," she murmured. "You keep needing to be fed." There was no judgment in his voice, only that steady warmth that made her wolf settle deeper into something that felt dangerously like contentment. Eat. Then we need to talk about the Thornwood pack. The name sent ice through her veins. Elena accepted the tray with trembling hands, forcing herself to take a bite of bread even as her appetite fled. What do you know about them? Eric moved to the window, his broad shoulders blocking some of the pale light. The worn soldier's coat he still wore did nothing to diminish the authority that radiated from him now that she knew what he was. Every line of his body spoke of contained power, of violence held carefully in check. I know Lord Thornwood died 6 months ago, Eric said, his voice hardening. His sister, Lady Sage Thornwood, has been ruling the pack since then. Ambitious, ruthless. He turned to face her, and something cold flickered in his gray eyes. And she's been positioning herself as a potential match for the Alpha King's throne. Elena's hand froze halfway to her mouth. She wants to be your queen. She wants power. The throne is simply the most direct path to it. Eric's jaw tightened. I've refused her advances twice. The last time was 3 months ago at the Winter Summit. She didn't take the rejection well. 3 months ago. Elena's mind raced, calculating dates. Marcus had been killed 3 weeks ago. The Thornwood pack had come for them without warning, without provocation, slaughtering a peaceful alpha and his pregnant mate for no reason she'd ever understood. Unless there was a reason. Eric. Her voice came out strangled. Marcus was... He was nobody important. A small pack. Barely 20 wolves. We kept to ourselves. We never threatened anyone. She pressed her palm against her belly, feeling her daughter shift beneath her skin. Why would the Thornwood pack come for us? Why would they kill him? Eric went very still. The quality of silence that filled the room made the hair rise on the back of her neck. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. What was your mate's bloodline? His mother was... Elena stopped. Thought back to the stories Marcus had told her, the ones his mother had whispered to him before she died. She was born in the royal court, a distant cousin to the old king. She left before Marcus was born, married a common wolf, gave up any claim to the succession. Eric's eyes had gone gold at the edges, his wolf pressing close to the surface. Your mate carried royal blood. Diluted, distant, but royal nonetheless. That doesn't matter. He never wanted... It matters to someone who's eliminating threats to her path to the throne. Eric crossed to her in 2 strides, dropping to his knees again so their eyes were level. His hands hovered near hers without touching, that careful restraint that made her chest ache. Elena, your daughter carries that same blood. If Sage Thornwood killed your mate to remove a potential obstacle, she won't stop hunting you until... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Elena's wolf surged against her skin, a snarl building in her chest that had nothing to do with the mate bond and everything to do with the primal fury of a mother protecting her child. She would tear Sage Thornwood apart with her bare hands. She would... Breathe! Eric's voice cut through the red haze. I need you to breathe. She hadn't realized she'd stopped. Elena dragged air into her lungs, her whole body trembling with rage and terror so tangled together she couldn't separate them. She killed him. She killed Marcus because he was in her way, and now she's coming for my daughter and I can't. I'm not strong enough to... You're not alone anymore. Eric's hands finally closed around hers, warm and solid and steady. The bond pulsed between them, his calm washing over her fury like cool water. You're under my protection. No one touches you or your child without going through me. She wants to be your queen, Elena whispered. If she finds out about us, let her find out. Something dangerous flickered in Eric's eyes, something that reminded her he wasn't just a king, but an apex predator who had clawed his way to the top of every pack in the realm. Let her come. The words should have frightened her. Instead, they settled something deep in her chest, a tension she'd been carrying for 3 weeks finally beginning to unwind. She wasn't alone anymore. The days that followed took on a strange rhythm. Eric arranged for her to be moved to a larger room at the inn's top floor, one with a real fireplace and windows that overlooked the main road into Millhaven. He hired a healer to check on her pregnancy, a kind-faced woman named Mira who clucked over Elena's swollen feet and pressed tonics into her hands. "You've been running too long," Mira said, her weathered fingers gentle on Elena's belly. "The babe is strong, but you've been pushing yourself past breaking. Rest. Eat. Let that man of yours take care of you." Elena didn't correct her about Eric being her man. The truth was too complicated, and besides, some part of her that she didn't want to examine too closely liked hearing it. Eric came and went throughout the days, conducting business she didn't ask about. But he was always there for meals, always there when evening fell and the shadows in her room grew long. He would sit in the chair by the fire while she lay in bed, and they would talk. Not about the Thornwood pack. Not about the bond that hummed between them, growing stronger with each passing hour. They talked about everything else instead. "Tell me about him," Eric said one evening, his voice soft in the firelight. "Your mate. Tell me who he was." Elena's throat tightened. She'd expected jealousy, possessiveness, the territorial fury that wolves were known for when it came to their mates. Instead, Eric looked at her with quiet patience, waiting. "He was gentle," she said finally. "Everyone expected him to be fierce. He was an alpha, after all, even if his pack was small. But Marcus was soft, kind. He used to bring wildflowers to our den every morning because he knew I loved the way they smelled." Her voice broke slightly. "He held me after nightmares. Every single time, no matter how tired he was. He would wake up and pull me close and tell me I was safe. He loved you." "Yes." The word came out on a breath. "We had 2 years together. 2 years of being happy, of building something beautiful." Her hand drifted to her belly. "When I told him about the baby, he cried. This big, strong alpha, crying because he was going to be a father. And 4 hours later, 4 hours later they came." Elena closed her eyes, but she couldn't block out the memory of Marcus's final scream, the way the mate bond had shattered like glass in her chest. "I heard him die. I felt it. And then I ran, because that's what he would have wanted. He would have wanted me to protect our daughter, even if it meant leaving him behind." When she opened her eyes, Eric was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. His gray eyes had gone soft, almost tender, and the firelight cast dancing shadows across his granite features. "You honor him," Eric said quietly. "By surviving. By carrying his child. By refusing to give up even when everything was taken from you." He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to something barely above a whisper. "I will never try to replace him, Elena. I will never ask you to forget him or diminish what you shared. But I hope—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I hope that someday there might be room for me too." Her wolf pressed forward, and Elena felt tears spill down her cheeks. She reached out without thinking, her fingers brushing against his jaw, feeling the rough stubble beneath her touch. "There might be," she whispered. "I think there might already be." Eric's breath caught. He turned his head slightly, pressing his lips to her palm in a gesture so tender it made her heart ache. The bond between them flared warm and bright, and for a moment, Elena let herself imagine what it might be like to stop running, to stay, to let herself be loved again. Then the door burst open. Elena scrambled backward on the bed as 3 soldiers in Thornwood colors poured into the room. Eric was on his feet in an instant, his wolf surging to the surface, his eyes blazing pure gold. "Stand down," he commanded, his voice carrying the full weight of the Alpha King's authority. The soldiers hesitated. She saw it in the way they flinched, the way their wolves wanted to submit to that voice. But then a woman stepped through the doorway behind them, and Elena's blood ran cold. Lady Sage Thornwood was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, sharp edges and deadly purpose barely hidden beneath a veneer of courtly elegance. Her dark hair was pulled back from a face that might have been lovely if not for the cruelty in her eyes, and she wore traveling clothes that had cost more than Elena's entire village earned in a year. "Your Majesty." Sage's voice dripped with false sweetness as she swept into a curtsy. "What a surprise to find you here in this quaint little town." "Lady Thornwood." Eric's voice could have frozen fire. "You have exactly 5 seconds to explain why your soldiers have broken into a room under my protection." "Your protection?" Sage's gaze slid to Elena, and the woman's eyes narrowed with undisguised hatred. "Ah, the little runaway. I've been looking for her. She is mine." The words came from Eric's throat as a growl, his wolf pressing so close to the surface that his features seemed to shift. "You will not touch her. She's a traitor." Sage's smile was poison. She fled the scene of her alpha's rightful execution, carrying information about Thornwood pack movements. "She's a spy and a criminal, and I have every right to bring her to justice." "Lies," Elena spat, her own wolf rising to meet the threat. "Marcus wasn't executed. He was murdered in our home while we slept. Your soldiers killed him because you wanted to eliminate a threat to your ambitions." Something flickered in Sage's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that Elena had figured out the truth. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by cold calculation. "Interesting theory," Sage said smoothly. "But without proof. It's simply the ravings of a grief-maddened widow." She turned back to Eric, her expression shifting to something that might have been flirtatious on a less predatory face. "Your Majesty, surely you can see that this woman has been filling your head with lies. She's desperate, alone, carrying another man's child. Whatever spell she's cast over you—" "There is no spell." Eric's voice was ice. "There is only the mate bond." The words hit Sage like a physical blow. Elena watched the color drain from the woman's face, watched her composure crack for just an instant before she pulled it back together. "The mate bond," Sage repeated flatly. "With her. With this pregnant, packless nobody. With my mate." Eric stepped forward, placing himself between Elena and the Thornwood soldiers. "And you will address her with respect, Lady Thornwood, or you will address no one ever again." Sage's jaw clenched. Her soldiers shifted uneasily, caught between their lady's orders and the Alpha King's command. For a long moment the room hung in perfect, terrible balance. Then Sage smiled. A smile that made Elena's skin crawl. "Of course, Your Majesty," she said, her voice dripping with false submission. "Forgive my soldiers their enthusiasm. I'll withdraw them immediately." She backed toward the door, her eyes never leaving Elena's face. "But this isn't over. A mate bond with a woman already carrying another's child? The Pax will never accept it. The Council will demand answers. And when they learn what she really is, get out." Eric's voice was barely human. Sage went. Her soldiers followed, their eyes downcast, their wolves whimpering in the face of the Alpha King's fury. When the door closed behind them, Elena finally allowed herself to breathe. Her whole body was shaking, and she pressed her hands against her belly, feeling her daughter kick frantically beneath her palms. "She knows," Elena whispered. "She knows about the bond, and she's going to use it against us. Eric, she's going to try." Eric turned to her, and beneath the fury in his eyes she saw something else. Fear. Not for himself, but for her. "Elena, I need to get you out of this town. She'll have people watching every road, every path. If she can't kill you directly, she'll find another way." "Where would we go?" "The capital." He crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "My stronghold. My wolves. A place where even Sage Thornwood wouldn't dare strike." "The capital," Elena repeated numbly. "The heart of the kingdom. the seat of the Alpha King's power, a place she'd never imagined setting foot in her entire life. But Eric's hands were warm around hers, and the bond was humming with protective fury, and somewhere behind them, Lady Sage Thornwood was planning how to destroy them both. "Okay," Elena said. "Take me home." They never made it to the capital. Elena felt the wrongness before she saw it. A prickling along her spine that had nothing to do with the mate bond, and everything to do with survival instinct. They had been traveling for less than half a day, Eric's hand steady on her elbow as they moved through the forest paths that would eventually lead to the main road. He had wanted to avoid Sage's informants, wanted to slip away before she could organize a pursuit. But the forest had gone too quiet. No birdsong, no rustle of small creatures in the underbrush, just the heavy silence that preceded violence. "Eric, I know." His voice was barely a breath. "Keep walking. Don't run." The first arrow sang past her ear and buried itself in the tree behind them. Eric shoved her behind him as soldiers emerged from the shadows. Not 3 this time, but a dozen, all wearing Thornwood colors. They formed a half circle, cutting off any hope of retreat. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as she pressed her back against a massive oak, one hand splayed protectively over her belly. "Your Majesty." Lady Sage Thornwood stepped through the line of soldiers, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. "I'm afraid I couldn't let you leave Millhaven quite yet. We have unfinished business." Eric's growl was barely human. "You're committing treason, Lady Thornwood. Attack the Alpha King, and every pack in the kingdom will hunt you down." "Will they?" Sage tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Or will they thank me for freeing their king from an enemy witch's enchantment? The story is already spreading, Your Majesty. How a desperate Omega used dark magic to ensnare you, to bewitch your wolf into believing she was your mate." Her gaze slid to Elena, and the hatred there was undisguised. "It's quite tragic, really. You'll recover, of course, after she's been removed from the equation." "There is no enchantment," Eric snarled. "The bond is real." "Then prove it." Sage's smile widened. "Submit to a truth circle. Let the old magic determine whether this connection is natural or manufactured. Unless—" She paused, letting the implication hang. "Unless you have something to hide." Elena's blood ran cold. A truth circle. The ancient ceremony where lies burned the liar, where deception became physically impossible. It should have been a simple solution. They had nothing to hide. Their bond was genuine. But she saw the trap hidden beneath the obvious challenge. "You arranged this," Elena said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Everything. You're not just trying to separate us. You're the one who had Marcus killed." Sage's expression flickered. Just for an instant, surprise broke through her careful mask before she reassembled her composure. "What a fascinating accusation." "It's not an accusation. It's the truth." Elena stepped forward, ignoring Eric's warning growl. Her wolf was pressing against her skin, awake and furious in a way it hadn't been since Marcus's death. Marcus had royal blood, distant, diluted, but enough to make him a threat if you ever wanted to position yourself beside the Alpha King. So you eliminated him. You sent your soldiers to murder him in his own home, and then you hunted me because—" She stopped, a horrible realization crystallizing. "Because I carry his child, his daughter, another heir with royal blood." "Elena." Eric's voice was strangled. He understood now, too. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for." Sage's smile had turned into something ugly. "But it doesn't matter. In an hour, you'll be dead, and your unborn brat along with you. The Alpha King will be freed from your enchantment, and in his grief, he'll need comfort. Who better to provide it than a loyal noblewoman who exposed the enemy plot?" She gestured to her soldiers. "Seize her." The soldiers moved forward. Elena felt time slow. She saw Eric prepare to fight, his body coiling with deadly intent, but there were too many of them, and he couldn't protect her and fight simultaneously. She saw Sage watching with cold satisfaction. She saw the soldier's hands reaching for her, and she knew, with absolute certainty, that if she let them take her, she would die. Her daughter would die, and Sage would win. No. The word erupted from somewhere deep inside her, from a place she hadn't known existed. Her wolf surged forward with a force that should have been impossible for an Omega, and Elena felt something ancient and fierce awakening in her blood. The same royal lineage that had made Marcus a target, the same power that her daughter carried in her developing cells. I invoke mate challenge. Her voice rang through the forest, and the soldiers froze. The words came from instinct, from some ancestral memory buried in her wolf's consciousness. I invoke my right to face my accuser before witnesses. I invoke the old laws that even kings must honor. Sage's composure cracked. You can't. I can. Elena stood straighter, one hand on her belly, the other clenched at her side. I am the mate of the Alpha King, recognized by bond and witnessed by the Wolf Moon. You have accused me of dark magic and treason. I demand a truth circle, Lady Thornwood, not for Eric, for myself. Let me stand in the circle and let the old magic determine whether your accusations have merit. She's bluffing, Sage snapped at her soldiers. Take her. Touch her, Eric said, his voice carrying the full weight of Alpha Command, and I will tear your throats out before you can draw another breath. The soldiers stopped. They were caught between Sage's orders and the primal terror of facing an enraged Alpha King, and their wolves were whining, begging them to submit. The laws are clear, Elena continued. Her voice was steady now, fueled by a calm she didn't feel. Any wolf accused of crimes against the crown has the right to demand trial by truth. Even a king cannot deny this right without losing the pack's loyalty. She met Sage's eyes. What's wrong, Lady Thornwood? Afraid of what the circle will reveal? Sage's jaw clenched so hard Elena heard her teeth grind. But she was cornered now, trapped by her own challenge. Refusing would make her look guilty. Accepting meant subjecting herself to magic that would expose every lie. Fine, Sage spat. A truth circle. Let the whole world see what you really are. The circle was drawn in the clearing where they stood, symbols traced in the earth with ash and moonstone powder. Word had spread quickly. Elena didn't know how, but by the time the preparations were complete, a crowd had gathered at the edges of the forest. Merchants from Millhaven, farmers from nearby homesteads, wolves who had heard whispers of the Alpha King and the pregnant Omega who had captured his heart. Elena stood at the circle's edge, Eric beside her. His hand found hers and squeezed. You don't have to do this, he murmured. I can order her arrest, claim King's justice. And she'll claim you're still enchanted, that you're not acting of your own will. Elena shook her head. This is the only way to end it. Let the truth speak for itself. She stepped into the circle. The magic rose immediately, ancient and implacable. It pressed against her skin like a living thing, tasting her intentions, measuring her heart. Elena felt it sift through her memories, Marcus's death, her flight, her fear, her love for the daughter growing inside her. The bond with Eric, bright and undeniable, pulsing like a second heartbeat in her chest. State your name, the elder conducting the ceremony intoned. Elena, once of the Wildfire Pack, mate to Marcus who was murdered, bonded mate to Eric, Alpha King of all the packs. No burning, no pain. The truth settled around her like a cloak. State your accusation against Lady Thornwood. Elena lifted her chin. She arranged the murder of my mate, Marcus. She sent soldiers to kill him in our home while we slept, because his royal blood made him a threat to her ambitions. She has pursued me across the lands not to bring a traitor to justice, but to eliminate a witness to her crimes and to murder my unborn child, who carries the same blood that made Marcus dangerous to her plans. The magic flared and remained steady. Truth, every word. Lies, Sage snarled from outside the circle. She's somehow corrupted the magic. This is exactly the kind of dark enchantment I warned. Step into the circle, Eric commanded. His voice was iron. If she's lying, the magic will reveal it. If she's telling the truth, his eyes blazed gold. Then speak your accusations to her face, Lady Thornwood. Let us all see who burns. Sage's face had gone pale. Her soldiers shifted uneasily, looking between their lady and their king. I don't need to prove anything to step into the circle. The Alpha command was inescapable. Elena watched Sage's legs move against her will, carrying her into the sacred space despite her resistance. The magic pressed against her immediately, and Sage flinched. State your name, the elder said. Lady Sage Thornwood. No burning. Head of the Thornwood pack, loyal subject of the crown. The last part made her hands twitch. Not quite a lie, but not quite truth either. State your accusations against Elena. Sage's jaw worked. She was fighting the compulsion, but the magic was relentless. She bewitched the Alpha King with dark magic, Sage finally said. She ensnared his wolf into believing she was his true mate. Her hands burst into blisters. Sage screamed, falling to her knees as the lie burns spread across her palms. The crowd gasped, wolves pressing closer to see the evidence of her deception. Tell the truth, Elena said, her voice cutting through Sage's cries. Tell them what you really did. Tell them why Marcus had to die. The magic wrapped around Sage's throat, squeezing words out of her like poison from a wound. He was supposed to be mine. Sage's voice was raw with rage and pain. The Alpha King was supposed to be mine. I positioned myself perfectly, eliminated every rival, and then he kept refusing me. 3 times I offered myself, and 3 times he looked at me like I was nothing. Her blistered hands clenched. When I learned about Marcus, about his royal blood, about the claim his line could make if he ever chose to press it, I saw opportunity. Eliminate him, draw out the king to investigate, make myself indispensable. I arranged for his death. I ordered my soldiers to kill him quietly, make it look like a border skirmish. The crowd's murmur rose to a roar. Eric stepped forward, his eyes fully gold now, his wolf barely contained beneath his skin. You murdered an innocent alpha, he said, his voice carrying across the clearing. You hunted his pregnant mate. You sought to manipulate the crown for your own ambition. I would have been a better queen than her, Sage spat, her gaze burning with hatred as she looked at Elena. I would have given you power, influence, heirs with pure bloodlines, not this pathetic Omega with her dead mate's brat. Enough! Eric's voice cracked like thunder. He moved into the circle, towering over Sage's kneeling form. For murder, treason, and conspiracy against the crown, I pronounce judgment. You are stripped of your title. Your lands are forfeit. Your name is struck from the records of the noble houses. Sage's face twisted with fear. No, you can't. You will be banished to the wastelands beyond the northern borders. You will run, Lady Thornwood. You will run until your legs give out, and then you will crawl. And if you ever set foot in pack territory again. Eric leaned close, his voice dropping to something barely above a growl. I will tear your throat out myself. This isn't over, Sage snarled, but her voice was weak now, her composure shattered. The packs will never accept her. They'll never... Go, Eric commanded. Now. The alpha power in that single word was inescapable. Sage's wolf seized control, turning her body toward the northern trees, and then she was running, stumbling, desperate, stripped of everything she had ever been. Elena watched her disappear into the shadows and felt something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness, She would never forgive. But completion. An ending that Marcus deserved. Eric was at her side in an instant, his hands cupping her face. Are you all right? The circle's magic? The stress? I'm fine. She covered his hands with hers. I'm finally fine. That night they returned to the inn in Millhaven. The room that had felt like a temporary shelter now seemed different. Warmer. Safer. Perhaps because Elena was no longer running. Perhaps because she had finally stopped being prey. Eric built a fire while she sat on the bed, her hands resting on her belly. The baby was quiet now, as if she too understood that the danger had passed. Elena. Eric's voice was soft. He crossed the room and knelt before her, taking her hands in his. The firelight caught the gray of his eyes, turning them to molten silver. I need to say something, and I need you to hear all of it before you respond. She nodded, her heart quickening. I told you I would never try to replace Marcus. I meant that. What you shared with him, the love, the partnership, the child you carry, that belongs to him. It always will. He pressed her knuckles to his lips. But I also know what I feel. The bond is real. My wolf recognized you the moment our fingers touched, and every moment since has only deepened what I know to be true. You are my mate, Elena, in whatever way you'll allow, in whatever capacity you'll accept. His thumbs traced circles on her wrists. I want to claim you. I want to mark you as mine and bear your mark in return. I want to spend whatever years the moon grants me proving that you made the right choice in trusting me. His voice roughened. But only if you want this. Only if you choose me. I will not take what isn't freely given. Elena's wolf was singing. Joy and longing tangled together in her chest. She thought of Marcus, his gentle hands, his warm laugh, the way he had loved her completely. She thought of the 4 hours they had shared with the knowledge of their daughter, the life they had planned together. She thought of how he would have wanted her to be happy. Yes, she whispered. Eric's breath caught. Elena. Yes. She pulled him up onto the bed beside her, her hands sliding to his shoulders. I choose you. I choose the bond. I choose to stop running and start living again. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of grief. They were something closer to release. Mark me, Eric. Make me yours. He kissed her then, soft and searching, his hands cradling her face like she was something precious. The bond between them flared warm and bright, wrapping around them both like a promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were pure gold. It will hurt, he warned, his voice rough. Only for a moment, but I know. She tilted her head, baring the curve of her neck. I'm ready. His lips traced the line of her throat, gentle and reverent. His teeth grazed the junction of her neck and shoulder, the marking place, sacred to their kind. And she felt the bond thrumming between them, building towards something immense. Then he bit down. Pain lanced through her, sharp and immediate, but even as it flared, it was transforming into something else entirely. Warmth flooded her veins, cascading from the point where his teeth pierced her skin, spreading through her chest and down her limbs until her entire body hummed with it. She gasped, her fingers digging into his shoulders, and through the bond she felt him, his fierce protectiveness, his desperate love, his joy at finally claiming what he had been waiting for his entire life. Mine, the bond whispered. Mine, mine, mine. When Eric pulled back, his lips were stained with her blood, and his eyes were wild with something that looked like awe. Your turn, he said, his voice barely recognizable. He tilted his own head, baring his throat. Mark me, Elena. Make me yours. She rose to her knees, her hand pressed against his chest where his heart thundered beneath her palm. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in existence, offering his throat to her, an Omega. a widow, a pregnant woman with nothing to her name. But she wasn't nothing. She had never been nothing. She had survived, and fought, and chosen, and now she was choosing this. Her teeth found the junction of his neck and shoulder, and she bit down. His blood bloomed across her tongue, salt and heat, and something that tasted like home. The bond between them snapped into place with a force that stole her breath, and suddenly she could feel everything. His heartbeat echoing in her own chest, his emotions tangled with hers so completely she couldn't tell where she ended and he began. His soul, ancient and fierce, wrapping around hers like a wolf curling around its mate in the darkness. Yours, he whispered through the bond. Yours, always. Mine, she breathed against his skin. Yours, he answered. They held each other as the marking healed, the bond settling between them like warm honey, complete and unshakable. Elena pressed her face into his shoulder and felt, for the first time in 3 weeks, truly safe. 3 months later, Elena was crowned Luna Queen in the capital. The ceremony was elaborate, all flowing robes and ancient words and wolves bowing before the throne. But Elena barely noticed any of it. Her attention was fixed on Eric's hand in hers, on the solid warmth of his body beside her, on the bond that hummed constant and content between them. When the crown settled on her head, the gathered wolves howled their approval. Afterward, in the quiet of their chambers, Eric pressed his palm to her swollen belly. Not long now. A few more weeks. She covered his hand with hers. Are you ready to be a father? He smiled, a real smile, soft and wondering. I've been ready since the moment I felt her kick. Their daughter came on a night when the moon hung full and silver over the capital. Elena's labor was hard but brief, and when the midwife finally placed the squirming, wailing infant in her arms, Elena wept with joy. She had Marcus's dark hair, his gentle brow, but when she opened her eyes for the first time, they were gray. The same gray as the man who had carried Elena's groceries and stayed outside her door and offered his throat for her teeth. Hello, little one, Elena whispered. Welcome home. Eric sat beside her on the bed, his arms around them both. The bond thrummed with his emotion, love, fierce and endless, for both of them. She's perfect, he said. She's ours. Not a replacement for Marcus. Never that. But something new. Something healed. As dawn broke over the kingdom, Elena looked out the window at the light spilling across the spires. She thought of the woman she had been 3 months ago, exhausted, terrified, running for her life with nothing but her dead mate's memory and the child in her belly. That woman felt like a stranger now, not because Elena had forgotten her suffering, but because she had moved through it. She had chosen to keep living, chosen to trust again, chosen to let love find her even in the darkest places. Eric's arm tightened around her. Their daughter slept between them, tiny fingers curled against her chest. What are you thinking about? He murmured. Elena smiled, pressing a kiss to his jaw. I'm thinking that I never imagined any of this. Being a queen, being your mate, being happy. And now? She turned to look at him. At his gray eyes, his rough stubble, the mark she had left on his shoulder visible above the collar of his shirt. Now I can't imagine anything else. The bond hummed between them, warm and settled. Outside, the kingdom stirred awake under the rising sun, wolves going about their lives in peace. And in a palace room flooded with golden light, Elena held her daughter close and felt, finally, like she had come home.